Welcome back to the Randy Wilson Podcast with my co-host, Dr. Tiffany, Jana. This is episode 19. We are in season 2, and today we are delighted to have Ashley Diaz Mejias. Ashley earned her master's in religious studies at the University of Virginia and her MDiv at Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond. Originally from Memphis, Tennessee, Ashley began regularly engaging in systemic bias while working as the educational director for a small nonprofit after graduating from college. Since then, she has devoted her academic and theological work to researching and writing on racial bias, and has written for blogs and led curricula for institutional and congregational conversations on race, systemic bias, and mass incarceration. Ashley is currently a candidate for ordination in the Presbyterian Church. Ashley is very family-oriented, living with her husband and her 3 young daughters as a part of an intentionally diverse community in the East End. Co-author with Dr. Tiffany, Jana of Erasing Institutional Bias is her first book, and we're going to get into that definitely a lot today. Both of you all are best-selling authors, correct?
Yeah, I would say that. Yes,
Yeah.
Because everyone who's listening to this podcast right now is going to go out and buy that book.
Definitely. Yeah. I wish I would have brought the book and put it right here in front of us. But definitely go check that book out, Erasing Institutional Bias. Thank you, Ashley, for joining us today on our show. We're extremely happy to have you. This podcast, I didn't mention it, is curated by Inso Media, Sam Anderson, and it will be brought to you everywhere podcasts or can be listened to, but we strongly encourage people to go over to YouTube so they can see you.
They can see me on YouTube.
Yes. And we're going to throw this thing everywhere.
Ashley Diaz Mejias, whom I met, our co-author journey was not, it wasn't, we didn't know each other like super well before that. She was actually, somebody nominated Ashley to help me write a blog after you were voluntold to submit some work to me because my first book, Overcoming Bias, was such a good success that I was overwhelmed with, speaking engagements and all these things. I didn't have time to blog anymore, so I was looking for someone to help me blog, and I was specifically looking for a ghostwriter, which I had never done before. And someone told me about Ashley, actually somebody who used to work in this building. And she submitted the work. It was really great. She wrote a couple of blogs, and I was like, this is so good. I feel guilty taking credit. So I was like, you're just going to need to blog and use your own name and do your own thing. And then when the opportunity to write the second book came, I thought that she'd be a great research assistant because the depth of her writing was, I write at a high level. I write from experience. But I don't, even though I have a doctorate degree, I don't spend all my time doing research. It's not my happy place. Research-driven work was definitely Ashley's happy place. So I thought, hey, I'm writing this book. Do you want to be my research assistant? She was like, Tiffany, do you realize that I have been researching this subject matter for the last decade of my life? I was like, hey, how about co-author? And that's all she wrote. Mm-hmm. Well, no, she wrote a book after that.
That was all. Yeah, that was it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
I mean, I think how you say that, though, is interesting. Like, you had to bring her on as a co-author.
I did.
And, I just feel like I had to have you as a co-host.
See?
Because the synergy is, I just feel like we look better when they see male, female. They see different you can be, objective, and you can debate back and forth, and you can bounce ideas.
I mean, I'm black. She pretends to be a white lady. It's amazing. Like, the diversity in the room is extraordinary.
Yeah. And, you came in the room today with I can tell you have a lot of personality. Like, I can just see the humor. I can hear it.
Pretty flat.
There's
nothing there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I would like for you to share with our audience, like, when I decided who would I contributed to the list of season 2 folks, I was looking for people in the world who are actually using their time, their talent, their intelligence, and their passion in service of humanity. Because there are a lot of people who wish to be making a difference and have no, they just don't have the internal compass or the external resources to make it happen. They don't know what to do, where to go. And so I wanted to start the season with people who found their direction and were just fervently moving in the direction of making things better for other people, and you are an obvious shoo-in for that. So I'd love to know, I'd love for you to share with the audience a little bit about what drives you and what you're doing to make change in the world.
Yeah, thank you. That's really kind. Well, I mean, so for me, my faith really drives me. And a lot of what I think about and what I try to do, not always successfully, and there's a lot of times where, I'll do something and I have to kind of backtrack and ask for help and ask for correction. And so I don't at all want to talk about what I do in the world as something that I've got figured out and that I think I'm doing perfectly at all.
But you're doing more than a lot of people are doing, which is you're trying.
Yeah.
And that has, you get so much credit for that
Well,
because you're out here doing it.
Yeah.
However imperfectly, you're
Yeah.
doing the thing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess there are kind of two aspects to how I got to where I am. Because like my ethnic background, as we've mentioned, is kind of ambiguous. I've always lived in these like liminal spaces. As we mentioned, I am white. I look white. I have a lot of white privilege. I'm white presenting, so I walk around in the world and am treated like a white woman. But I'm Latinx. I'm Cuban, and so I've always been really confused about that. It's always been really challenging to figure out exactly where I fit in, and so that gave me a lot of, I guess, kind of like anxious energy to ask a lot of questions. And so because of those questions, throughout undergraduate and then into graduate school, I was asking a lot of questions about race and racial constructs and how do those work and what do those do to put us in certain places in society. And those questions, I think for most people, kind of end up leading you down a path of realizing that our systems and institutions are actually what organize us into communities in in the United States. And it's not so much that certainly our intent matters, or the way that we desire to treat one another matters, but a lot of our ideas and feelings about one another are conditioned and held in place because of the things that institutions have been set up to tell us about what they've been set up to tell us about one another. So for me, as I continued down this path, I inevitably wound up at mass incarceration, which I think is where our culture is kind of landing nowadays. Fortunately, we're talking about it more. Thank God, right? Because I think we have a legacy and will continue to have a legacy, much like with slavery and with Jim Crow and with the black codes and with all these different things that we're going to have to reckon with for a long time. So I wound up there and felt like, as somebody who kind of exists in these liminal spaces and as a person of faith, I was going to have that was where my responsibility is and was. And an interesting thing is, if you look at the Bible, I'm not trying to preach, but
Preach.
But if you look at the Bible, there's nothing, you can't read the Bible without really thinking about incarceration. I mean, there are tons of people in Scripture who are incarcerated people. There's Paul. There are all kinds of prophets who are incarcerated, and even the New Testament's main character was somebody who was incarcerated and who died, or who was executed in state custody. So those things really kind of laid it on my heart to commit to this, and so.
Thank you for bringing Black Jesus into the conversation.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
I am a follower of Black Jesus.
Amen.
I mean, that's my faith legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So as a follower of a Jesus who was taken into custody and executed at the hands of the state, I felt like, part of what I wanted to do, and I also, I'm a firm believer and have been taught that race is, in many ways, an economic construct. And so relocating white wealth is a part of what I've wanted to be busy doing. And so the bail fund, I think, is a way to do that in a small...
The bail fund? Is that something that you started?
Oh, yes. Well, let me tell you about the bail fund.
Tell me about the bail fund.
I will tell you about the bail fund. So all over the United States for about the past 10 or 12 years, in different communities where there is cash bail, And if you're not familiar with cash bail, that is just the very simple premise that when you're arrested, many times the magistrate or the judge will say, you, you, Ashley, have been arrested for trespassing. We have these statutes, and for X, Y, and Z reason, we are going to hold you until your court date, but if you can pay $3,000, you can be released until your court date. Well, that's all fine and well and good if I have $3,000, or if I have $300 to pay to the bail bondsman. But if I don't have that money, then I'm going to be forced to stay in the city or county jail.
So for those who don't know, it's what, 10%
10%
of the bail to the bail
bail
bondsman.
and you lose that money. If you have the full amount to pay to the, if you can pay the full $3,000 in our example, when you show up for your court date, you'll get that money back, but you have to be able to part with that $3,000 for the time between your arrest date and your
You just taught me
court date.
something. I'm just kind of like, I like to be like vulnerable in moments and say,
Yeah.
this, I did not understand how
Yeah.
that worked
It's very
until just
confusing.
now.
Yeah,
I've
it's
always
quite
wondered, do you
confusing.
get your money back? Where does the money go? That's really good to know.
You do get your
Okay.
money back if you pay the full
The
amount
full amount.
to the court or to the
So when people
clerk.
get those like $800,000 for, whatever,
Right.
if they can pay the whole thing, they get it
Right.
back.
And this is where the bail bondsmen actually really prey
Yes.
on communities that are on poor communities.
Yeah.
Because they can ask them for a smaller amount, but those people will lose the smaller
lose the
amount.
smaller
And the
amount.
bail
Oh.
bondsmen are actually a heavy lobby, heavy political lobby for the perpetuation of cash bail.
Sure.
So these folks, and it only actually takes on average about 3 days for people to be incarcerated and lose their job, their home,
Oh, God.
any number of things that you can imagine that could be lost within a few days of you being incarcerated.
Home?
A home, like your
How-
apartment,
how-
if you
oh.
can't pay rent.
3-day grace period.
I mean, a lot of times people have already used that. You know, if you're short on cash and you
You're
can't.
already late on your rent when it
Yeah.
happens. Timing is everything.
Yeah.
Yep. And unfortunately, when someone like a bail fund can come in as an intervention, it's already been several days or weeks that folks have been locked up. So all over the country, these community bail funds have started popping up, and what these bail funds do is they kind of crowdsource a fund that is accessible really to anyone, and they usually pay folks low cash bails just because it's difficult to raise money for like an $800,000 bail.
Sure.
They'll crowdsource funds and will get referrals. Frequently they work through the public defender's office or other or community referrals, and they'll act as a revolving fund. So when someone gets arrested and they're given a bail, and then a bail fund comes in and says, we'll pay your bail, that they'll help that person get through their pretrial whatever period, and they'll give them a reminder for their court date. And then when that person gets a final disposition on their case, and their case is finished no matter what the outcome is, that money will come back to the bail fund, and the bail fund can then use that same money to bail someone else out.
Brilliant.
And
Brilliant.
so that's what I
great.
and a couple of other folks have been working together to do for the last 2 years.
So the money just can just
revolve.
keep being used for good. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I assumed that money was coming in and going out, and you had to keep getting. Oh, that's fantastic.
No, and,
so
we don't
wait,
have-
hold on. I just
oh,
have to
go
stop in this moment and say, there's a lot of people with a lot of resources, deep pockets, resources, who want to put their money to good use or put their time to good use. This seems like a really constructive way, because for people who don't know, it is really expensive to be poor.
It
and it
is
is really
so
painful to be poor.
expensive.
There's so much. I mean, and I've been there.
Yeah.
I've lived below the poverty line, and it is brutal. So where do people go right now if they want to contribute to a community bail fund or your community bail fund?
Right. So if you're local, if you're in Richmond, so we have a website. It's rvabailfund.org, or just Google. I think that's our website. Sorry, I'm terrible at
Social media.
web thing. Yes, Tiffany already knows.
I tried to promote a book with this woman.
Right,
It
it's
was
awful.
brutal.
I'm
but
like,
she's a really talented
I'll
writer.
go into prison, but I can't. I don't. What's
I don't go to
the
social media.
interweb? Just Google Richmond Community Bail Fund. If you are somewhere else, look in your area because there are a lot of places that have, like, lots of places have community bail funds. There's a national organization that kind of parent is not the right word, but just kind of organizes all the community bail funds, and you can look on. It's the national. I think it's the National Bailout, and you can look that up.
That's a great way to put your money to good use if you want
really
to talk about
is.
creating opportunities, because it is a lack of privilege and it is an abhorrent set of systemic biases that keep people rotating through these systems.
It really, truly is, and the collateral consequences are devastating. They're truly devastating.
And I want to go ahead and point out that no amount is too small.
Absolutely
So
not.
if you got $5, $10, and you're
Yes.
willing to put it to some good use, do it. Because if enough of us decided to go ahead and put in $25, that's a really big deal. But by all means, if you have $5,000, is it tax deductible?
Yes.
Oh, y'all, it's
Yeah.
tax season coming around. Put
It's the end of the year.
$10,000 into your local community bail fund. Thank you very
It is
much.
the end of the year right now.
Yes.
Go ahead and clean it out.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, and and just as an additional plug, you may also hear in your neck of the woods, wherever you are, and even in the state of Virginia, this is a big talking point. But a lot of places are touting like ankle monitors or electronic monitoring devices as alternatives to cash bail, as positive alternatives, and certainly, it's preferable to not be, physically incarcerated, to be out, or there are, jurisdictions will say we have this pretrial services division that we want people to report to rather than being incarcerated. And I think that it's important for citizens to be informed about how these things work. And Michelle Alexander has actually done some really good, I think there's like a New York Times opinion piece that she wrote several months ago about electronic monitoring. But all of these things end up functionally continuing to monitor and incarcerate people who are already struggling, and they don't actually make our communities any safer. It's really important for us to understand that it's kind of a faux mechanism for safety, and the state of Virginia has done pretrial services and electronic monitoring since the mid-90s, I think. They've done, and a lot of times they'll layer these conditions on folks here, so they'll have pretrial services and electronic monitoring, or they'll have a cash bail and pretrial services. And
The outcomes
are just horrendous when it comes to actually helping folks live a life that is conducive to health and thriving. And it has actually nothing to do with restoring people to citizenship, which, in my mind, if you're thinking about eliminating whatever criminal behavior it is that you're interested in eliminating, restoring them to citizenship should be the goal, and that's not what these things are about. So I've talked for long enough, so that's what I'm up to.
Sounds like institutional bias.
Oh,
in
yeah.
itself.
Completely.
Big time.
Yeah, it's
Big
what
time.
the last two chapters of our book are focused on.
Yeah, tell us about this book. I didn't haven't had a chance to read it.
Right, this book. Well, Tiffany, you should share about it.
So, Erasing Institutional Bias was the follow-up to Overcoming Bias. Overcoming Bias was like an independent study on identifying your own bias. And then the idea was that if people have bias, then so do the institutions that we build. And so we went through the usual suspects, gender bias and racial bias, and not to throw them away like they're not important, they're all important and terrible. but religious bias, all kinds of biases we went through. That might have been my fourth book that did religious bias. I can't keep them apart anymore. But we went through the list of demographic biases that people are more familiar with, and then I think that our scholarly contribution was retribution bias, and we thought for 15 seconds that we coined the phrase, and we found out that somebody put it in their research and had 2 sentences on it, but this was the first of the biggest kind of expanding of that notion, and we were just looking at the idea that human beings have a tendency to prefer punishment over rehabilitation, punishment over community. And I would say that you contributed significantly to those 2 chapters, because that is that's the work that you've been working on, the space that you occupy. So it was an honor to learn with you and from you in that space. And I will never be the same, having contributed to writing those and reading them. I've dedicated a part of my life and a part of my heart to men and women who have been in those circumstances. It hasn't touched me personally in my life in a significant way, but by seeing through the lens of the narrative that you've shared and that others have shared, we did a podcast with Paul Taylor, and it was through our work that caused me to have an openness to an experience that was not near to me. So thank you for giving me proximity through your worldview, and hopefully that's something that we can offer to other people. If this has not touched your personal life and your family, these are things that you should know about, because as a nation we are turning a blind eye to some of the most abhorrent atrocities. We treat people in subhuman manners based on things that should not be criminalized the way that they are. And even when people find themselves in circumstances where they engage in activities that are antisocial or less than ideal, we need to help them, not lock them away. I grew up in Germany, and Germany, for instance, has a completely different way of treating people who move outside the confines of the law. They don't have a premise of stripping away their humanity. When German people are incarcerated, when they break the law, they are when they're allowed to wear their own clothes in their prison system. They're allowed to be in rooms that have locks on the doors. And if a cafe latte is what they want in the morning, they can continue to have their cafe latte. They can continue to pursue whatever activities bring them joy, but within the confines of an enclosed system. It's kind of like a loving timeout versus a throw you away and the key too.
Yeah, I think it really boils down. I mean, because what is happening in the United States is really unprecedented. I mean, there is nowhere else that is doing precisely the kind of racialized violence still that we are doing on a state-sanctioned level.
And per capita, we incarcerate more people, more of our own people than any other nation on earth, more than any other continent on earth.
Yeah, and I think it boils down to who. I think when I at least, and I'm sure I'm borrowing this from someone, but I think
maybe one other person, based off the fact y'all coined that term. That's amazing to me. You mean that term that
retribution bias
had only been used one time?
Yeah, in the research that we could find, somebody named it in a research paper.
Yeah.
And wrote literally a couple sentences on it.
Interesting.
I think it really has everything to do, and I mean, when you look back historically at all of the ways that America has justified violence against people of color, it has everything to do with who we think is a human, and that has enabled our that's enabled our behaviors. I mean, and our policies and our continued way of being, and white supremacy is what fuels that. And so,
that delusion, delusion of white supremacy.
Yes, which, if you haven't heard, my dear friend Dr. Tiffany Jana has some writing on that.
The delusion of
white supremacy.
I mean, that's something that I was not expecting to talk about here with you today, but.
I don't know why you wouldn't.
Well, not the delusion of white supremacy, sure, but what I want to share with the audience is because I like the idea of sharing the journey. I didn't wake up Dr. Jana. It has been a journey, and I wrote a piece on Medium called "The Delusion of White Supremacy" that was it was a vulnerable massive thing for me to write. Probably the hardest thing I've ever written. And it's it's an essay. It's not a book. But the journey that you went with me, like you went on this journey with me, having the courage to write that. Like there was a time where I would never have uttered the words white supremacy. And for the record, I preface the words white supremacy with the delusion of, because words have power, and when we run around saying white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, there is a subconscious kind of acknowledgement that maybe it was ever real, that whiteness was ever supreme, and it never was and never will be.
You have to say delusion of 3 times.
I say delusion
now.
of, delusion of, delusion
There
of.
you go.
There we go. But it was while I was writing the book that I wrote after we wrote one together, while writing the third book, my co-author Ryan Honeyman is a white man who, was on fire about the delusion of white supremacy. And I was just like, oh my God, I wish this white man would stop talking about this. Like, what are you doing? And he was like saying all these things and writing stuff. And I'm like, that is scary. You're going to get me killed. What's wrong with you? And it woke me up to the extent to which the delusion of white supremacy was actually affecting my day-to-day life. The myriad constructs that were holding me, Dr. Tiffany Jana, with so much privilege back. There were things I wouldn't say or do because of the delusion of white supremacy. And I was deep in conversation with Ashley about these things. And you were like my anti-white supremacy, my anti-racist coach, and like gave me that push off the cliff and said, like, do not allow this fake ass construct to hold you back. Say the thing, do the thing, be brave, because you got this. So you ushered me across a threshold that has changed the trajectory of my life and my career. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, that makes me want to cry.
I cried many an anti-white supremacist tear.
I love that.
Thank you.
These are anti-white supremacists.
That's right. That's right.
I'm interested in what your process was like. I mean, you all are best-selling authors. I told Tiffany the first time, I was like, wow, I think you're the first time I've had a conversation with a best-selling author. Now I'm having it with 2. What was the process like? Like, was it, imagine that you just had a lot of conversations probably, but how did it transfer to the book?
I mean, I feel like it was, I'm just going to be so honest. I feel like there was a lot of texting, and it felt like writing a really long paper.
Yes.
That's what it felt like. It was just regular.
You sound like some real writing artists. I mean, they just texting and you just like, it's like an artist going into just freestyle and just messing around, and all of a sudden, I'm going to make this an album. I'm going to make this a
Tell
song.
Randy the story about when you asked me, all right, Tiffany, how are we going to do this? How do you want to write this? Because I had only written one book before, but I have this, I'm obsessed with version control. If you're writing a book writing anything with another person, like back in the day, you had the word processor, you had to send the Word document, and then you send it, and now you edit it, and then if I edit at the same time, we got to figure out who edited what.
Yeah.
We have Google Drive now.
Yeah.
We don't have to do that. So I was like, let's just write the book in Google Drive. It works for me. I've done it before. So what was your reaction?
Well, and so this was a moment of me confronting my own white supremacy, my own delusion of white supremacy. So, I've been to like 85,000 years of graduate school, which, and graduate school is its own form of white supremacy. And at UVA, University of Virginia, has it's special there.
Yeah, very special
Which
place.
we could do its own podcast on white supremacy at UVA, but
You want to go there and do it?
no, I'm good. I like Richmond. I'm fine.
Show up on the lawn.
Yeah, I might have flashbacks.
We'll need security for that one.
Right, exactly. So for me,
I think we took you hostage. It was 2
Right.
black people.
I feel like you gotta help that
Oh
little
my
white
God,
lady.
yeah.
Are you okay?
I'm a
Blink
quickly
once.
like,
Right.
say your last name?
Mejias.
Mejias, then that might confuse
Yeah,
them.
they'd be super confused. I've got some stories about that. So, I've been in this environment where like there's always this vague notion of like what it means to write a book, and in Charlottesville at UVA, everybody's like writing a book, like Harvard Press or whatever. Which I'm not, but whatever.
Yeah.
And so, Tiffany has made this invitation to me to do this very exciting thing. I have no idea what it means. I've never done it before. So I'm asking her, like, how are we going to do this? And I'm thinking, there's going to be some very complicated system of organization that's going to be way too hard for me to understand, but I'm going to have to get with the program. And so I ask her, and she says, we're just going to use a Google Doc. I was like, did I misunderstand? Wait, what? She just wants me to use a Google Doc. And she's like, yeah, we're just going to start writing. Like, we're just going to start. We're just going to start. And I was just like, this cannot be. It cannot be this easy. We cannot just use a Google Doc to write a book.
UVA grads, you're just so smart.
No, we're not. It's like an illusion of like everything has to be like really hard and complicated.
So it's the delusion of UVA being one of
Like
the best
everything has
schools
to
in
be
the world.
really complicated. It doesn't. So I realized like my own white supremacy had been telling me, like I thought it couldn't be, this wasn't serious enough if we were just using a Google Doc. It wasn't academic enough. But that I realized was a total lie. Tiffany has written books before. I have not written books before. If Tiffany had been like, yeah, we're writing it on rolls of toilet paper, that's how I've written these other books, I should have been fine with that because who's published the books? Tiffany, not me. So, and it was fine. We wrote it in a Google Doc. We got it done.
And when we sent it to the publisher, we turned it into a regular document,
what
a
they
Word
asked
document,
for,
and then
yeah.
we went through the whole crazy professional process.
Right.
But what about, you have a wonderful story about being in school and having an experience with I think it was a black female professor who ran her classroom a little bit differently.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I had this, she's since passed, and her name was Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon, and she was just like this presence in the world. I mean, just every student I know who has interacted with her considers her a mentor. She's like a famous, she's in like all these social ethics textbooks because she's one of the, if not one of, she's the mother of womanist theology, which is basically kind of responding to white feminism and saying, you know, there is a way to look at feminism and do it from the ground of black femininity that is, it's just incredible and beautiful, and she mothered that into the world, and it is incredible. So she somehow, by some miracle in the world, Union Presbyterian Seminary hired this woman, and she was there. It's amazing. So, I go to Union.
So was there any other people of color there?
There were, let me just.
Seemed like it might have been a culture shock.
Yeah. She said the only reason that she knew that she was supposed to be there, and I've met very few people with as little resentment. Publicly. I don't know about her, like how she privately felt, but she did not carry herself with anger or resentment. She's just she laughed a lot, very joyful. But she said, I knew I had to go there when I felt God's foot in my back. So she just felt a very strong sense of like, this is where I had to be. I did not know of any, I don't think there were any other professors of color there. Well, that's not true. There were,
Cafeteria workers.
there wasn't a cafeteria. But I'm sure there would have been. There were some other staff people, but, so.
Think about it, but she was faculty. She was
Yeah.
faculty, and a lot of times,
Well, and
these
she's
schools
like-
are not. They're like, you got staff.
Yeah,
Right.
at
faculty.
one point it was my intention to audit one of her classes because she was a legend.
Yeah.
She was an absolute legend.
Yeah.
Say the name again. We want to make sure the audience is.
Katie Cannon.
Katie Cannon.
Katie Geneva Cannon. She's incredible. So, most graduate school classes, if not all, that I've been in, the only other class I'd been in that was kind of similar to hers was taught by another womanist professor at UVA, who was the only professor of color in the religious studies department at UVA. They're lecture oriented. the teacher's up in the front, or the professor is, and everyone is facing the professor. In her class, though, she would begin the class by making sure everyone, like we would always sit in a circle or some kind of shape where everyone was like facing each other. She would orient the class so that everyone had an opportunity to speak, whether that was like we would read something, or she would go around and like have everyone respond to a question. She always had us read what our responses were, and it like felt too easy. Like it felt like a really easy class. However, somehow, whether it was like magic or God or I don't know what it was, or the Holy Spirit, students who entered her course with some really fixed ideas about race, about their own ability to be racist, would exit the semester completely changed. And it was incredible. I mean, and she would have this ability to invite us to interact with probably some of the most difficult material.
What was your first response to her course? Or her style?
That it was just too easy. That it was,
Yeah.
she was too easy.
The delusion.
Right, right.
Yeah, it was my own way.
Did you think it was like, was it the same kind of like not so serious?
Yeah, it's like,
or
this
like
can't
this like
be.
kumbaya circle?
Yeah,
and is this a learning experience?
Is too easy. And
Got
the
it.
classes that is like the right kind of hard for graduate school.
The right kind of hard, I love
Right,
that.
are the ones that I'm miserable in, and that I would leave and I understood like 2 sentences.
You're getting your money's worth.
Right, this is right. The ones that I am having a panic attack as I'm walking into. However, I don't remember anything from those classes, and I remember virtually everything from hers. And her classes are the ones that have shaped me so that I'm doing the work I'm doing now.
And in your class, I'm imagining it wasn't a diverse population of
No,
students. It was just
absolutely
white.
not. Yeah.
That's, I mean, which makes it that much more amazing that she was able to get them to identify their own issues personally.
Yeah, and I still remember talking to her one afternoon and saying something about how I felt like, I always felt like I wanted to go into, I felt this sense, I feel like I'm in therapy right now. I felt this sense of like, I really wanted to go into a prison. I felt like I needed to go and see, because it felt so horrendous to me that there were buildings filled with people, that we were still filling buildings with people. I couldn't, and I just like, I don't know if I can even believe in God that we're doing this. Like, this feels so violent and awful, but I feel like I need to go. And I don't know if I should. And she was like, well, then just go. Like, it was like so easy and straightforward for her. And I was like, it's not that easy. And she was like, yeah, it is. You should just go. Let's just figure out a way for you to go.
So that is when I'm out doing the work, diversity, equity, and inclusion space.
And you just left UVA.
I did just leave UVA. I was speaking there all day. Yesterday, was it maybe? Day before? Yes. Yes, I was Thursday. But what I like to share with people is we have a vast world, a universe that is full of both love and pain. There are so many wounds and so many causes and so many places that we could direct our loving energy and our loving intention. And a lot of people in 2019, 2020 are overwhelmed and are disheartened at the extent to which our world is broken. And what I like to share with people is this idea that you don't have to fix everything. You don't have to focus on solving every problem. And to me, whether you believe in God or the universe or some benevolent energy or the flying spaghetti monster, don't care what it is you do or don't believe in, when your spirit is disturbed, when you feel that something is wrong and out of whack, and you get that sensation, that visceral sensation in your gut that just makes you want to vomit, pay attention to that, right? Because animals are great. I'm a vegan. I don't eat them anymore, but when I did, they were delicious. I know that a lot of people have fur babies that they love very much, and they love them as much as I love my human babies. But I'm not an animal person. You're not going to catch me volunteering at the SPCA. But it takes all types to heal this world. And I'm appreciative of the people who do make sure that my cosmetics company isn't testing on animals and causing them harm. But that doesn't speak to me.
Yeah.
When I learned about what was happening with mass incarceration and our jacked up system, that spoke to me. Even though I don't have anyone who's incarcerated or been incarcerated in my immediate family. It doesn't touch me personally, but it has spoken to my heart. So what I would like to say to our audience is that when you look at the world and you recognize that there is pain and that that things need to be done and you don't know what to do, listen to your heart, listen to your gut, listen to that place inside of you that just says, oh my gosh, this is not okay. And then research that area, focus on that area. Like what I respect and love about you, Ashley, is that one, you wear your whiteness responsibly. Though you are you are a woman of Latinx heritage, you are white passing, white presenting, and you wear it responsibly. And whether we are white, black, green, polka dotted, or purple, each of us can be part of the solution. Each of us has some privilege somewhere, and what you've done is something touched your heart, and even though you were kicked in the back by Katie Cannon, you did the thing. You showed up in the space, you learned what you needed to learn, and now you're contributing meaningfully. And I feel like your story is an invitation to all of us to be more intentional about how we spend our time.
Thank you. Well, it's funny. I think the more we listen to our gut, our God gut, or our spaghetti monster gut, or whatever it is, I think the more it becomes clear where we're supposed to pour our time and our energy and our passions. And I think y'all had Paul on here, and Paul has been with me at the children's prison at Bonnier Juvenile Correctional Center. And, those kids are convicted of some really, really hard charges. And to be with them is to be with teenagers. They're just teenagers when we're with them. But to hear the stories of their lives and to hear the stories of the things that they've been charged with and convicted of is to hear and to think about a world that is shaped by a lot of pain and fear and trauma. And it just reminds me, that it's not just about us as adults and like what we want to see in the world, but it's also about our kids. And I just think about my girls a lot, and I think about these young, they're all boys, about these young men, and it makes me want to keep doing the work and keep trying to think creatively about ways to relocate money and to just find different ways to say you are worth it. Like, you are a full human. You are worth time. You are worth effort. You are worth love, and
No one should be judged for their entire life based on their worst mistake. Like, if every single one of us was judged based on the worst thing we'd ever done forever, like, what kind of world is that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was thinking about what you said. Like, every part of our body has a responsibility. Our eyes, our ears, and our mouth has a major responsibility. However, we don't always use it well. So, just thinking about the stomach thing, you say you got thinking about your gut. Every decision can't be a gut decision. And every decision isn't always practical. And I tend to think that if you use your brain and your stomach, because it's spirit-led, I feel like if it meets here in the middle and comes out your mouth, it'll come out your mouth better. But it's got to be a combination of your spiritual gut instincts and what makes practical. It's a balance.
Yeah, that's
But,
good.
and I had a mental health client help me. I heard it, basically the way I described it to you is the way I heard it from them. And they was going through a moment of psychosis and explaining why they felt the way they felt. And even though it didn't make any practical sense, the last thing we can do is ever tell someone that their feelings aren't valid. Everyone's feelings are valid. This has been an incredible show.
This is why you feel like you're in therapy, because he's a whole
Oh,
therapist.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. That's why we like hanging out with you.
But she's not a whole white person. She's a half. She's not. She's a Mejias. I did not know. I didn't
Randy
know.
Wilson podcast, bringing half white people to you.
Hey, I'm so glad though that you came on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having
one of the
me.
comments that I got from the audience that you need to diversify, and you definitely have helped us diversify that.
I'm
You
so
are
glad.
fantastic. You are the first white,
diverse
first white
guest.
guest.
I've never been.
You've been first your whole life. Don't start lying now.
I've been a white person.
Look,
Diversity.
I hate to. We don't want to close, but we have to. This has been episode 19 of the Randy Wilson podcast, featuring Dr. Tiffany Jana and our first white
Half
guest. Thank you for your humor. Your humor came through the door. Really appreciate having you. Remember, you can check this podcast out everywhere. Randy Wilson podcast on everything. And we will see you next with episode 20. Wow.
Sweet.
Like it's a monumental moment here. Thank you guys. See you next time.
Bye.